Welcome.
Thank you.
So he's from Recreation?
Yes. So
We're borrowing, we're sharing?
We stole no. Yeah.
Oh, you're
We stole him.
Yeah.
We stole him.
Oh.
So we stole them from the rec center.
Seems to be a trend in recreation.
Oh.
Well, I guess we can get started.
Just
We've
we're
got
charming and it's supporting the older.
You are, but it's Ronnie I'm worried about.
He's stealing everybody.
He's young. He's young.
He's smart.
And he remembers things.
There we go.
Yeah.
Sometimes. Sometimes.
What is this, your
A lot
sixth?
better than I do.
Is this your 6th anniversary? 6 months?
Yes. This is
Oh my gosh, already?
Already.
Holy
happened,
cow.
happened very quickly.
December, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you do a before and after, like we took your photo and then we took
Yeah.
your photo?
Well, I was just counting the gray hairs.
Yeah.
There's a lot more.
There's a lot more now.
Yeah.
Jeff knows how that feels.
Actually, when I met him, he had hair down here.
Yeah.
The job's tough. All right, I guess we can get started. We do have a quorum. That's good for the clarification. Thank you, Doug, for that. Approval of the agenda. Are there any additions to the agenda? Everybody should have gotten a notice from Ronnie about the addition of recreation
Yeah,
center.
I'd like to add under new business, maybe the July meeting.
July meeting,
Yeah.
okay. Anything in particular?
Just that I won't be here, and I don't know if anybody else is gonna be here. This is the day before the fourth,
We
or the day after
normally,
the fourth.
in the past,
Oh.
we haven't met in July because we've been closed. I don't know, now
Oh.
that'll probably be August when we don't meet,
Okay,
but
well, I guess we can talk
Because our
about
closure
that.
We talk, yeah. talk
That's a
about
good
it.
idea, because I probably won't be here either.
Everybody else gets a meeting. So.
AAC
Should we talk
is
about that
good
now in
too.
case we get
Sure,
too busy?
okay,
Sure.
sure.
Yeah,
Well, I'd be available, we're not going anywhere, but what about the rest of you?
I will potentially be gone.
well, the issue I just wanna bring up is that our closure date, sorry if I can, our closure dates have changed, so normally the senior center was closed end of June, early July, so we'd always skip the July advisory meeting. But now we're closed end of July, first week of August, so our building will be closed and we'll be having a department retreat on August 2nd, which is the day we would meet in August. So if you don't meet in July, you're also missing an August meeting.
Wow.
So
Well, we could move on.
Well, we can move the meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do it to another day, if that's okay.
Janine?
Get my calendar out here.
Thanks, Robin.
yeah, I'm okay, and the same thing happened with AAC. They're not meeting this month or next month. So a lot of the boards, I think, are, and the way it falls, like the fourth
So
is
Tuesday.
on a Tuesday and we'd be meeting on a Wednesday. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be around, but I don't think we'll make quorum.
My question is, we have 2 new people, correct? That will be
Oh, they
coming.
will be coming, yes.
So, but I don't know what their schedule is either, so. The 4th of July, we have to see.
Well, can we just move it to August 9th?
To what?
Could we just move our meeting to August 9th?
So skip July and do August 9th.
And the center will be open on the 9th.
Yeah,
Up
we
until
have
the-
to make sure we have a room, but yeah.
Okay.
But, yeah, it'd be your first week in August, you're closed.
Correct.
Or conversely, we could do the second week in July.
Yeah, we could do that too.
Well,
Yeah, I can move trips around, I just need to have a date.
Well, on August 16th at 8 o'clock, I have Change the Cat Box.
so do we want to do the 12th of July?
The 12th, Saturday? Oh, July.
12th of July, that works for me.
Or
Does it work for
the
anyone
second week
else?
of August? Either one's fine.
Oh, actually,
Well,
yeah, I can probably be here.
12th of July,
It might be a
and
little
we're
bit.
open that day, right?
Yeah, if we don't have a room, could they meet at Lashley?
We could
just
figure
have to
something.
check.
So they might be at capacity because of some programs, but we
Okay.
could find a location somewhere.
Okay.
So, yes, I could.
Okay.
So we're talking the 12th at 10?
What's that?
Yeah,
Well,
I'd like to.
12:10, yeah.
10 a.m. and then I'll look at location. We'll look to see, obviously here first. If not, then we can explore other options.
And do you also want to do August 9th?
That's right, we've got to work around August 2nd. August 9th. That work for
Hang on
everybody?
just a second, let me get this July in here. Okay, that's done. And then August
August 9th, going once.
9th, let me check here. Sorry, I'm so slow, I wanna get it in here. I cannot, but
You can't?
no, I've rescheduled that appointment in Lafayette 3 times.
Oh, okay. No.
Sheila will be back.
But we could do it a different day maybe,
Let's
but,
try it.
Yeah, that's the problem, you start
No,
changing
I
things
can't.
around, then,
So August 2nd doesn't, well, we're not gonna be here in August, right?
The senior center is closed and the senior center is having a department retreat.
So July 12th.
August 16th, is that too close to, that's 3 weeks away from
yeah, that's the thing.
the 6th of September.
Well, we could skip August.
We have skipped in the past. It's happened.
You,
We have skipped in the past. Usually in
Yeah.
the summer we skip 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Why don't we worry about August? Let's see, we'll have our July meeting.
yeah.
Why do we kind of plan on skipping August, but we can talk about it further in July, I suppose.
Okay.
Should we just
Okay.
tentatively skip August?
Okay,
I'm gonna leave it on my calendar.
Yeah,
We'll
yeah.
be meeting in July and we can talk about it
Yeah,
again.
the problem is
Yeah.
once you change dates and it
And
affects
if,
all.
and if everything, if anything major comes up,
Yeah, we
you know,
could be-
we're always
Yeah.
available.
Right, right.
Now, is Lashley opened on, August 2nd?
I'd have to take a look.
Cause that's an option too, our regular day.
Well, but just, what I'm hearing is that Ronnie and Robin are not available.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
that's-
see.
That's the thing,
Oh,
yeah.
I
I
thought
see.
you were talking about the ninth.
No.
So we're
Okay.
kind of working around you guys, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so then July 12th at 10 o'clock. And then at this point, we'll cancel August 2nd.
Okay, and you'll remind us.
August.
on
And then we'll
in
talk
July.
about it again at our July meeting.
Cool.
On the 12th.
okay, a long one.
Okay, I suppose someone,
You big troublemaker.
Yeah, I know it.
It's all your fault.
Ronnie, could you send something out, or I can send
Yeah.
something out, doesn't matter.
Yes.
Does this
Can you
need
send
to be
something
a
out?
motion?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, back
Does
to
this
the,
need to, she's asking, does this need to be a motion?
I don't think
I
so.
don't think so. Approval of the agenda. Anything else on the agenda to change? Okay, all in favor of the agenda as presented? Okay.
Aye.
Motion, a second?
Yeah.
Okay, a second. All in favor, say aye. All right.
Yeah.
Is there any public to be heard? No public to be heard. Old business,
So-
most of these items, I think, yeah,
Could-
right.
Yeah.
We can skip most of these old business items in deference to our speaker today. Have you met everybody so far?
I think,
Yeah, but
yeah.
That was
Ronnie.
exactly what I was gonna say.
Okay.
is
Oh,
to
okay.
skip the
Okay.
car-
Do we need to
Okay.
approve the minutes? That's on my agenda.
Yes, we do.
So Janine, first, right, was first?
I got the
Yeah.
agenda, that was for the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I move we approve the
minutes.
minutes.
From May.
Thank you, Jim.
I second.
Okay, any further discussion on the minutes? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we'll skip old business and we'll go directly to our speaker today, Carmen Palacios Ramirez. Did I say that right?
You did?
Okay. And you have met everybody?
Uh-huh.
Okay, good. And anybody, did Jeff or Ronnie, did you want to make an introduction at all? We don't know too much about her.
So, thank you for being here, Carmen. So our board has had discussions around, well, let me backtrack. So we did make a budget request to add a Spanish programmer for our facility. It's an inequity that we've recognized that has been overlooked for an extended period of time. As our programming has expanded tremendously, over 100%, our Spanish programs have only increased by 8 programs in that same amount of time. So, the board identifying that's a need that we want to address, we made a budget request for 2024 for a Spanish programmer who would intentionally plan Spanish programs for our seniors. In that process, looking ahead down the road, we want to identify how to, if this position is approved, how do we best program for our seniors? What are the needs, senior needs in our Latino community, and starting looking ahead and having those conversations of what are the needs, how do we I guess communicate out to these new speak to these new programs and get the word out, and just start being intentional in this work of what we would want this person to accomplish if this position gets approved. And so that's why we asked you to come in today, and thank you for being here to share your experiences of conversations you may have had, things you've heard over the years, and giving us kind of a starting point of where to look when we're able to start programming for this position. That's that okay?
If I could add something, even if we don't get the position approved, we don't know if it'll be approved or not, but hopefully we would want to move in the direction of additional Spanish programming anyway, and additional outreach. Not quite sure how we do that without the additional staff, but anyway, that's the direction I think everybody wants to go.
And in that work, in our last board meeting, we were able to kind of generate some ideas of questions we want, and those are the questions I got in front of you in advance to kind of they're a little vague and a little general, but it allows us to start thinking about this.
Sure. So I'm going to start with a little bit of my background and involvement, specifically not just with the Latino community, but also other communities of color. So I think that might be helpful to help folks. And Mr. Quintana is one of our gems, community gems within the Latino community. So I want to call that out. But the other piece that I want to call out is that Ronnie went up to the Wind River Reservation this past weekend with us. And as we start looking at how to be more inclusive and the things that we're doing, the city of Longmont, I don't know if you all know, is the first community to become a sister cities with a sovereign tribal nation. So the recognition of our communities of color as assets is really what is building on some of the success. And I went through the questions and everything, and part of where you see pockets of success is based on that commitment and investment, right? Saying, well, we know we want to do this, we may not get a position, but we're going to continue to ask, and we're going to figure out how do we allocate resources to do that outreach. So I just want to share, I've been here since 1991. Mr. Quintana beats me by a little bit. He's been here a little bit longer. I came in 1991. I've worked for Boulder Housing Partners, and then I worked for Boulder Valley Schools as a family liaison. But I've also was part of the founding members of the Latino Task Force. And in 2001, we did the first ever assessment of the Latino community at a county level. Because at that time, you would go to frontline folks and ask for recommendations, but then those recommendations wouldn't follow. And I'm giving that timeline because a lot of things have started that have placed us in an understanding of the value to be more inclusive and invest in programming that is more multicultural. I think Ronnie sent everybody a link to the Resiliency for All report. I don't know if you all saw that. So that Resiliency for All focused on our Latino community, but again, keep in mind the Latino community is not monolithic. So we have Chicanos, we have folks that have been here maybe one generation to maybe new immigrants. And within that, the language varies, right? We have folks, one of the things that I really appreciate about the Senior Center is your resource folks will ask the question of what language do you prefer? And that happens a lot. I will tell you that many years ago, I was at the emergency room and I was talking to my husband in Spanish, and the nurse came in and said, do we need to get an interpreter? And I'm like, no, I speak English, but when I'm in pain, I speak in Spanish. Because I was cussing a little bit. But it's understanding comfort. It's understanding welcoming. When we talk about creating new programs, how do we welcome people? What we found out with the Resiliency for All is we focused on monolingual Spanish speakers, bilingual youth, and cultural brokers. Does everybody know why cultural brokers or what that means?
Not really.
So cultural broker, Mr. Quintana is one of those. They understand two worlds in a way. So we understand our Latino community, some of the norms, the language, the culture, but we also understand how to navigate systems. When I worked with Mr. Quintana in the schools, he was my go-to to help me with kids that were having problems in their families that were not understanding the system. How do I navigate that system? How do I talk to people who maybe don't look like me, don't speak my language? What is it that I need to do, right? So those are cultural brokers that understand how to navigate. Our bilingual youth are key to that. Within our Latino community, being intergenerational is real important. So programming, it would be important to have intergenerational programming. The library several years ago created, and before I share this, sometimes we create programs and we have successes, but we don't sustain them. So it's important to sustain them. The library several years ago created Loteria Night. So it's the Mexican bingo. And that brought in not just Spanish speakers, but their families, and then started bringing in English speakers. Day of the Dead is the largest celebration in the state of Colorado. Most people don't know what was the initial conversation. The initial conversation, Martha Clevenger said, why don't Latinos come to the museum? And we gathered a group of community leaders, and the first thing we said was, we didn't know we were invited. We didn't know we were welcomed. And what do you have that would be of interest? If you go by a store, for me, if I look at a dress or a blouse, right, in the window, that I'm like, oh, I like that color, I think I'll go in. How I'm treated and how I'm welcomed is gonna say if I'm gonna stay, right? And so what we created was Day of the Dead. And Day of the Dead grew and grew and grew, right? So I think you have to think of programming in that way. You might start small and then you grow. But important is going to be your outreach and your bridges for outreach. So in the Resiliency for All, our bilingual youth are key because they help not only interpret, but they help to provide some sort of security, right? And for seniors, when we've got the adult children that say, Mom, it's okay for you to go to the senior center. They're going to treat you well. They're going to welcome you. And you can stay there. You'll be okay. But know that many times a lot of our Latino seniors who are more homebound in the sense of transportation. So transportation is an issue, right? If I've got to wait for my son to come so I can go to something, but he's working all day, or maybe I'm caring for grandchildren. So the intergenerational piece is something to think as you move through this on the programming. Here's the barriers that were identified, and they hold. What's interesting about the Resiliency for All is that I presented to the Nepalese community, I presented to the mountain community, and they identified with the same barriers and had similar recommendations. So the barriers were access to resource information. When we did this study and we talked to folks through Boulder County, they said, oh yeah, we have brochures in Spanish. And I said, where are they? They said, they're in the closet because we have no one to give them out. We have no one to sit there and say, hey, Jeff, have you seen this? Let me explain what it says here. And that I'm a trusted person, and Jeff says, Carmen said I could go and they'd be nice to me, right? Those things that are on top of just having materials, right, is that you need to get it out there. The other thing was discrimination and fear. Mr. Quintana's been in this community a long time. He understands discrimination and why some of that fear is there and how do you get over, right? And the way that we get through that is by making sure that our entrances are welcoming, that there's something that says, hi. When we were dealing with COVID and setting up COVID clinics, we went to the community. So we went to the Title VI schools or Title I, I forget what, We went to the schools, and instead of register here, we had welcome in several languages. That was the first thing, because getting to business is something that is very common within our systems. There's no hello, there's like, here's what you need to fill out, here's what you need to register, get that to me and then we'll talk, right? And that is not how most communities of color relate, right? They want a smile, they want a hello. Is it, can I ask you some questions before I fill out forms? You have to have staff that are not only bilingual, but bicultural and understand why someone might have discrimination or fear. Language and communications was the other barrier, cultural sensitivity, and then the last barrier was outreach, engagement, and education. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
No.
So that's a very interesting comment about the welcoming and can we talk first? Because I think one of the other things we experience at our front desk is I want to be in and out of here as quickly as possible. I don't need you to be talking, and I'm talking about white people in this case. And how do I get out of here as fast as possible? How do we balance those two things?
Well, see, I think in the outreach, when you're doing the initial, it's about teaching systems, right? And so you need to have kind of a separate person that can take that person that needs a little bit more time, whether it's language or something, to one side, and then the other person that I'm used to processing. I know what I need to do to register, I'm in and out, so that you can kind of serve both sectors of the community. And then I think the other piece is outreach, engagement, and education. And the reason we put those all together, because it goes back to what Jeff just said. Some folks, if we're talking to Chicanos who have been here 7 generations, don't really speak Spanish, they might likely be like, oh yeah, I can read this, yeah, I got it, let me sign up. If we're talking to someone who's been here maybe a short time or is not as fluid in their English, right? Then that might take a little bit more time. And so that's why we put outreach, engagement, so it's engaging them. It's not just like, here you go to the senior center. It's like, let me tell you what's happening at the senior center. What do I know about you specifically? I know that you've got adult kids that are working a lot. You run into other people, you feel at home, right? And then that education, okay, in order to sign up for the programs, here's what we need to do.
Can I ask Ronnie a question?
Sure.
In relation to both. Ronnie, do we have any bilingual volunteers?
That was exactly what I was gonna ask.
Well, great minds think alike.
We
Do
do.
we have, because, you know, as I'm listening, I'm also processing solution that perhaps a person that's bilingual could be available to come out and serve that. We can't have somebody stationed in the lobby, you know, all day, but we might be able to access a bilingual person that could come out and do that welcome and answer those questions before they even get to the front desk check-in.
And you all have a really already a good base because your resource folks are very well connected. But again, you're talking about resources, right? They're already overwhelmed, so it's not good to bring them out. Creating those volunteers to do that. And maybe within them, I have a little note here about grow your own. Have you checked in with folks that come regularly and that know the community and would be willing to be those volunteers who maybe at some point maybe a person you hire?
Maybe those several generation Latinos know a lot of people that speak English and Spanish, and that would be an excellent resource. And my neighbor was raised in Chile, and so she speaks fluent Spanish. She worked for the library for years, and she was their #1 resource.
Yeah.
And she would be excellent in, you know, she just retired too. I mean, there are these people in our community, but they're not invited in, I guess, or, you know.
They're not invited in, and I will tell you that Mr. Quintana when we've done work in the community, part of that is like, I need your help, Mr. Quintana, can you help me connect with families? Can you do this? Understanding the big picture of need and opportunity to, like, you know, Mr. Quintana doing the little video around, you know, being on the board. But I think that one of the things that happens is like, we created a program and 2 people showed up. We expected 20, right? We need to know that things slowly develop because of what I said earlier, not only the language, but the fear, past experiences of discrimination, those things. And Mr. Quintana, you were gonna say something.
Well, I was gonna say, obviously, volunteers would be the first thing we really want to look at, it, to have somebody out there. But the other thing, and I know it's difficult, Ronnie, because I mean, we heard from Harold the other day, we have the same people we've had for years here, or the same number of staff people. But if the Spanish speaker in the front goes to lunch, if there's anything we can do to bring somebody up, that's gonna be great. Now, when I worked in the schools, when I started there at schools, every time there was a Spanish speaker, they'd call a custodian.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying that we use a custodian for that, but even if we have to use, what's his name? The custodian, the day one?
Steven?
Oh, Stephen took over. Well, what happened there?
Transferred, so Stevens.
Oh, geez. 'Cause I was gonna say, even using him for a few minutes to give him, you know, because he used to interact with everybody here.
Mm-hmm.
But I was gonna say, but if we can get some kind of a staff member even, or volunteer number 1, but if there's any way that we can have a Spanish speaker up there at all times, that'd be great during lunch or something like that.
So we don't have one in the lobby, but we have Bianca, who's.
Yeah, but when she goes to lunch, that eliminates the Spanish speaker, right?
Right, so.
Tell
But
me
think
again-
about that.
Tell me again, how many Spanish-speaking staff you have? Was it 3?
We have 3, 3
Okay.
up front and 2 resource specialists.
Okay.
So I know that when we went up with Jenny Diaz Leon, and her mom is, we call her Pina, Josefa is her name. But I think she went on some sort of outing
Yes.
with the senior center. And she was like, this is great, I didn't know about it. And she's lived in this community for a long time. And she was like, and then the thought was like, do you find kind of senior ambassadors within our Latino community that can go and say, hey, next time there's this outing, how about you come with me, right? Or we create a programming. You have a lot of programs like crafting and quilting, but if there was an opportunity to create something with a Spanish-speaking group first and have some bilingual folks, that is another way to slowly, kind of incrementally begin to grow it. We're gonna do crocheting, this group is in Spanish. What we have found over the years is that sometimes it's okay to have separate groups because it provides that comfort and that fluency of being able to speak in your own language, right? How comfortable are you gonna be to engage and participate if they're speaking a different language and you're the only English speaker, right? And so those are little ways that we can begin to build and grow on that.
I'm thinking the most important thing is to identify those people who are bilingual in our community. And I'm thinking that there could be, and I'm framing this as I speak, there could be someone on the city staff that could reach out to the community to find those people. And I'm thinking we have the newsletter, and there's more room in it now because they're not doing the mayor's deal every month.
What newsletter are you talking
The city, the one that comes in the
about? City Line?
yes, thank you. That there is a call for Longmont community members that are bilingual to come to a meeting to discuss the needs of our Latino community. and to have those bilingual people at the meeting to see where the needs are. And, you know, there's a lot of young professionals that, I mean, what's the name of the guy that owns Marcos? What's the last name?
Oh, I don't know what his name is.
Well, his daughters are very intelligent and they're business leaders and in the community. I mean, I don't know if the one that used to work at Elevations is still in the community. I believe she is. The Archuletas. I mean, there's so many people that could be called upon, and some are retiring. Some of those bilingual people are retiring now. I think of Claudia Archuleta, who was at the Y, gathering those names, because I don't think we really have done that in the community. I mean, citywide. And those people could serve to grow the programming, I mean, the outreach for Latino people, not just seniors.
Is there anyone in the city right now that does that sort of thing, that's just suggested? Have they done that in the past? Is there a directory or a?
There is not.
Okay.
None of that has been built out. In our office, Community and Neighborhood Resources has served as kind of the bridge, the primary bridge. But what you're asking is a great idea. How you build it up is maybe where you need to really have some thought of, do you invite those individuals to a cafecito to have a conversation that says, this is our starting point. We feel that you're part of this bridge because of language, because of connections.
And leadership.
And leadership and cultural understanding. That's really important, right? And so you invite the Claudias, the Manuelas, all these other folks that could come, Salomon, some of the Salomon, Jasenia, who's in insurance, and have the
The artists at
conversation.
the Bavaria, I mean, the Acostas, there's so many people.
Well, but, and I think the other issue to that is asking them what works for them in their time. I think sometimes when we say volunteers, if you're working to survive, if you're supporting your family, whether it's caring for grandkids or caring for adult kids, you may not have the same kind of equal time available, but is that a great starting point? And that's why we looked at bilingual youth and we looked at cultural brokers.
And it's important not to pick somebody like Art that's just put into everything and just have a broad base.
Yeah.
Where there can be a monthly meeting of these people, maybe. I mean, I can envision that, and I think maybe a part-time staff could.
You said bring people in.
Very part-time could get that going.
Do you mean bring people into this group, or are you talking about other groups, or?
No, create, so we've done focus groups or we've started committees where it's like, there's a need. So when we did the Latino Task Force assessment and we did the Longmont strategic plan, we bring people in to talk about what are the needs, where are the opportunities, and how can you help? Because that's the beginning of that group that then says, well, yeah, you know what? I know this other person that I think they'd be interested. And then you grow it outside of this.
You don't want them to come together thinking that they're going to be volunteers and they're going to have to do everything. You want them to be the leaders and the idea starters and the networking people.
And they also can advise you as to the infrastructure that you'll need. You'll need the infrastructure, you need the support and resources that you need, right? I can't tell you the number of times that I get invited to come and talk to people, and what they want is, give me the formula, or better yet, what they'll say is, bring me the box of chocolates with a bow. And I'm like, it doesn't work that way. One, we are not a monolithic community, right? So we have to really hone in on who and why within this large community, right? And that there hasn't been a relationship.
Well,
And it is a process. I'm sorry, Dave.
That's okay. So you're suggesting maybe we do several things. I don't know, we're kind of bouncing around here, but that's okay. You know, we could bring people in here. As a matter of fact, we talked about contacting people just like you described. You know, like you were talking about churches, for example, a couple of meetings going. We've had some other suggestions on how you might go out and contact people. You could also have, I guess that would be probably a main starting point, but we could also have a staff member or members of this group contact various people, like, again, using you as an example, contact local church organizations and
But-
say,
I think it needs to come from the Latino community, not you.
Well,
I
no,
think-
no, no.
you know, I
For her-
was thinking, we have classes. Have we ever gone into one of those classes and asked them, you know, how did they get there? What made them feel safe about coming together?
So a survey?
Not even so much a survey, because honestly, Ronnie, I think if somebody walked into the quilting class bilingual and said, you know, we are so happy that you are all here. Is there anything we can do to bring more of you in? To bring more, what can we do? They could potentially, if they want to, be a resource or
Well,
reach out to their
It
neighbors.
sounds like you're suggesting an incremental approach, because it's not gonna happen overnight.
It's not.
You
It's
gotta
a
build this thing
process.
over time.
Right.
So to me then, the question is, where do we start?
So I think there's a couple of opportunities. You mentioned something that we haven't tapped into yet. So when we look at all the different programming and you look at the diversity of that, right? So if you walked into a quilting class and you asked, have you ever thought of why we are very monolithic and should we be more inclusive, and what would that look like? Because you want to create allies on the other end, right? You want to create folks that are going to say, you know, yeah, we could really reach out, and it's okay. I speak a little bit of Spanish. How welcoming are those different programs? Because that's very key, right? No one's going to want to participate if they don't feel like anybody's going to offer them a seat, try and speak to them. So that's one piece, right? The other piece is what you talked about, which Mr. Quintana has tried to do, is how do we have, and you've got three really good questions here. How do we create a cafecito with just the initial conversation?
What is a cafecito?
A cafecito is where you invite
A
people.
coffee clutch?
Coffee clutch, but you have to have pan de dulce, sweet bread, or burritos. You can have burritos, but it's really because surveys don't work very well, especially in the Spanish-speaking community. Conversations, that's why we've done focus groups.
So when I meant survey, I meant more of the surveying that group of the asking questions. Additional questions. Because you're getting that specific feedback, right? It's not the general yes, no's, it's not the, you give, what's the word I'm looking for, not qualitative. You know,
Right, qualitative, yeah.
Is there an organized group? The only thing I ever hear about is El Comité.
Right.
Is there an organized group that could be a Latino coalition for a unity coalition, community unity coalition?
So we used to have those groups, but unfortunately, because we were not sustained, currently there's a big void in the Latino community in regards to leadership. We had the Latino Task Force, we had El Comité, some folks retired. I will tell you, I was part of the initial group where we did in 2001 the community assessment. It took us 13 years to get people to institutions to give us funding to do a second assessment. So again, that's why I'm talking incremental, but I'm also talking is in your planning, you have to think about sustaining, right? How are you gonna sustain it over the long term?
That very part-time person that I mentioned, that might be a city employee, could be in charge of, where do I hear the term unity in community, unity of community, unity in community?
The chamber, so the
Is that
chamber.
the chamber?
The chamber has one. We also used to have an event called Inclusive Communities that got so popular it outgrew the senior center, the museum, and we have not been able to bring it back because it got so big.
Well, if we had a very part-time person just to take the ideas and help and let them grow with goals in mind.
Yeah.
And that could all be ironed out before it's even put into a request. I think a lot of young people would be interested in jumping on board with something like that because they care about their elders and they care about their families. And I just think of Latino Coalition for Community Unity.
Let me switch focus just a little bit here.
Sure.
What kind of a timeline are we thinking here? You just mentioned 13 years it took you to reach a certain goal. But one of the questions was, what does the Hispanic community think of us? And so I'm thinking, I have no idea. I'm thinking if they have a high opinion, that kind of dictates one thing, but if they don't think much of us, that's something else. What's your judgment on that?
So what I get from the community is that overall this is a good place. You have staff that have strong connections. You've got Veronica, you've got Melissa, you've got volunteers like Ubaldo Valdez and Mr. Quintana, and other folks. You've got a good perception because the one gem, right, it's only one gem and we should have multiple gems, is the senior dancers, right? And they're all over the place. So that gives the appearance of it must be a welcoming place. Now, how do we expand and create more gems? The other thing is that community partners and cultural brokers, we all know, like, oh, I'm dealing with a senior, I need to send them to the senior center. Now, capacity is the issue, right? So I have to tell people, okay, you need to call Veronica, but please keep in mind that it could be 3 to 4 weeks before, or 2 weeks before she can get to you. So they know the resource end of it because you have culture brokers that are helping people navigate, connect to housing, health, food, right? The programming side is not very well known in regards to our Latino community. And even look at your demographics in your programming. I don't know if we do that. Do we do like a demographic baseline on our programming?
No, we don't have anything built into our system that can generate that information.
That gives us an idea, and then
Would
how
that be
do
easy to add?
Yeah,
No.
we don't have anything like that right
You
now.
can't
It's not built into our system.
Put into the registration process?
So we've talked about it, we've had some discussions about it, but it's not built into it right now.
Yeah, this is where those infrastructure pieces, there has to be some brainstorming, some strategy development to identify the resources and infrastructure that you need for that.
You know, I've felt for a long time that we need more of a baseline. We don't have really baseline information like you just suggested. Is that critical?
I think it helps in identifying strategies and then understanding when you meet your goal, right? Because what is your goal? So I brought some basic demographics. Our Latino community, this was in 21, was 24.4. But again, that's lumping everybody. That's going from monolingual English speakers to monolingual Spanish speakers, right? And so if we don't know those things, then they can be point in time contacts. Where you like do something right now and assess what are the demographics, what are the language spoken. I know that you have individuals that are Chinese and some Nepalese that come, very few, but we should begin to collect that information. These efforts that you're doing now should be focused with the Latino community as a starting point, but it really should be about becoming multicultural. Right, and communities of color feeling welcome at this place.
Dave brought up something. How do they receive the gringos? And the reason I'm bringing it up again is because I witnessed something here. We had an event here at the Senior Center. It might have been the holiday thing. It might have been the it might have been the open house where we had Spanish dancers. And they were in a room back here, and I witnessed a lot of pissed off people. Yeah, I did, and it was before I was involved in the board, but there was a lot of commotion among that group, and, you know, I just felt a lot of tension, from that group.
I felt they were noted. Nobody went to see them.
Well, I don't know if that was it. It was something in getting them started or whatever, and I thought, that's just not right. So I think those kinds of things need to be looked at carefully.
You know,
I don't know how to explain it other than that.
I walked in to the quilting class one day. I was walking down the hall. They were doing their quilting and I just walked in. And I'm embarrassed that I'm not bilingual. But I walked in the door and I just smiled and looked at what they were doing. And I said, beautiful. And I walked around and each person showed me what they were working on. So sometimes it's just a matter of the first step. And I think with that open house, part of the problem was they were placed in a back room and out of the way of traffic, where if their presentation had been front and center, perhaps it would have been more available to people. But we don't think about those
So
things.
you know what I'm talking about.
Well, I think it goes both ways. I think there is a level of distrust, that's for sure. But I think that sometimes that discomfort on one side and distrust on the other can actually come in very simplistic ways and meet at the center. You know?
Were they in the back room getting ready to
Yeah.
perform? Is that where
They
the
were
fun
in,
would
their
be?
performance was in the back.
They were in the quilting room, weren't they?
Yeah, it was,
Yeah.
But other groups were in there too, it wasn't just the Latino groups.
Right.
And there was a personal conflict that day that I'm aware of,
Oh,
so it wasn't,
okay.
it was a.
I just
personal-
happened to,
And being new, not even knowing any of that, like I before I even started, I popped in to that open house. And I think there was technology issues as well. So they weren't able to start on time. The music wasn't playing, and I think maybe a collection of all of these.
Okay.
right.
So I think the other thing is that we need to be very honest, right? That it doesn't matter whether it's senior programming or youth programming or community program, there are microaggressions, there are biases, and there is folks that, you know, I worked in housing for a while, and we had senior housing, and then we were told by HUD we had to allow younger disabled individuals. Different communities who have not had interactions and relationships sometimes don't play very nice with one another. And so how do you kind of also combat that? Has anybody really announced to everybody that comes to the senior center that this is a welcoming place for all people, and what does that mean? That means we provide service in 1 to 2 or 3 other languages. That means that you may see people that are different than you, right? And that we will not tolerate when there are microaggressions, right? And having been a person that, because I'm light-skinned, sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't happen as often or as severely as someone who is darker skinned. Those realities, Jeff and I have had multiple conversations. It exists in recreation, it exists across the board. But if you are aware and conscious and you are building towards, this is a community space that is welcoming and inclusive of all, and what does that mean? And what are our values, right?
you think of those yard signs that some people have?
Yeah.
Everybody's seen them that have all languages. I mean, I don't know how many there are, but many. And diversity is welcome here. People put them in their yards.
And then how do you live that? So the city of Longmont has a land acknowledgement, right? And I read that statement and I provide training and I say, and here's the action behind it, right? Behind those statements or those signs should be action.
It sounds like everything reduces to a personal contact.
It does.
It's that one-on-one.
Yeah, you can't just put up signs. I mean, you can't, I mean, that helps.
You should put one
Yeah,
outside the
sure,
senior
yeah,
center or the
yeah.
rec center or, you know, the library that welcomes everyone. Just, I mean, just that. Oh my God, there's my language. Wow.
The welcoming piece is important. And how do we include? So those are the things that you need to sustain and continue, but then how do you go from the sign to the cafecito, to the join me on this exercise class, to the join me on this outing? Like, that is why I say it's incremental and we have to build up, because that's what's really important. I wanted to show you this picture here of these folks. So the senior center often has been a place where information needs to be mined, and they will work with Veronica to pull together a focus group, right? So what happened to all these people in the photo? I know some of them are still around and older. So how do we make sure that we've engaged them beyond what do you think of the senior center? What are the needs, right? So that's the first step, like you said, but then what is the additional steps?
It needs to be bigger than, it needs to come from the city. It can't
needs
just
to
be
come
the
from all of
senior,
us.
senior center.
It needs to come from all of us. And the city on a whole is doing that. We are very focused internally on doing equity training. And we are, if you look at the multiple efforts, the first that I just called out, those first happened because we had support and staff to do that. Now sustaining it is a whole different thing, and I think I'm close to time, so.
Yeah, you are, but let me ask one last question.
Sure.
On the issue of equity.
Yeah.
Now, I know that's a goal of the city,
Yes,
but, and you have an average income, median income of 80,000 or 79, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Around $80,000. Now, I'm suspecting that the median income of Hispanics families is probably something less than that.
it's lower, yes.
And that the rate of poverty is somewhat higher.
Yep.
And that we are probably out of sync as far as white people in poverty having services versus Hispanic services for low income. I imagine there's a discrepancy.
Yes,
Now, is that something that the city cares about? Is that something that the city wants to reduce? Is that a goal of the city?
caring and being able to afford are two different things. And I'm closer to the exit door in regards to retirement, so when I say things, I kind of feel like, but the reality is, yes, caring, but if you look at our city and just on numbers, we do not have a staffing to population ratio. We have asked for that. I have had conversations with Jeff for years about providing either reduced cost in recreation for a lot of our low-income families. I know the school district, at one point, it was 1 in 4 Latino students were receiving free and reduced lunch, and that number has only grown. So yes, that poverty is there an awareness and a commitment? Yes. But the resource is where, and again, because we're not growing incrementally, right? Sometimes we wanna do this Band-Aid approach. I'm gonna hire 2 people, or I'm gonna hire 1 person, but in reality, we need 4 people, right? So, and then that person gets overwhelmed, right? I can tell you, or Jeff can tell you, the number of issues that I've been involved in over the year have been great on the resume because they're very diverse of all the issues that have been involved, from seniors to birth, right? From housing to health to violence to, because there hasn't been more than one. This is the first time in years that I actually have more bilingual people in my division. So what does that mean when things happen in the community? We're calling on the Mr. Quintanas or Marta Moreno, we're calling on all these other folks to help fill in because that resource is not there. But at the same time, that resource is not there overall.
And I can't tell you how many times I've seen it where we've had a really strong staff person and that person leaves and things just crumble. Because people were so connected to that person.
Built around the person.
Yeah.
I hope Carmen's not gonna retire for about another 20 years.
No, Mr. I'm gonna retire.
Or just as long as you and I last.
Well, that's why I think it's important just to include, we're trying to get more programming for Latinos, right? And so I think the Latino community, those young people that have parents that are not speaking English, need to get more involved. If that is what is wanting to be created, it has to come from that community.
So this starting point of getting information and brainstorming, and then the next thing is developing strategies so that then managers and directors can say, in order for me to provide this service, this is the infrastructure and the resources that I need. And then when Jeff can go to Harold, but it looks like Harold came to this group, and so I'm sure he kind of gave you a preview of the challenges.
Money, honey.
Nobody had, but I can tell you that the things that I have been involved in over the last 22 years have really become first in our community. Not only the Day of the Dead, inclusive communities, but I'm the person that in a city council meeting, Veronica was sitting with me and she was working at the Art Center. I didn't tell not only her, I told her mother, I told her aunt and her uncle, she needs to apply. She needs to apply for this position. And that's where even in hiring, we're recruiting people. I'm constantly getting job announcements that saying, I need someone bilingual, bicultural, right? There's a high competition for folks that have those skills. So I think you also need to think about that. But you're off to a really good start, is this brainstorming, build strategy plans, and then incrementally go after increasing that and celebrate the successes. We often don't do that. We often don't say, even if it's just based on, some informal data collection, we have now 20%. What is the number? Do we have 20%? Do we have 30% of participation, right? And as you increase it, celebrate it.
One of the things we do with Pete Sala sends something out on a regular basis on different positions that are available.
Yes.
And you know what? If you could, I could get together with you, but it'd be nice if you met with Pete and talk to him and have him even put something out on the announcements that volunteers are needed and programs or there's something to that effect that would help. I bring it up at the Latino Coalition on a monthly basis, but again, those people are so involved in so many things that it's hard for them to do it. But if you get a hold of me, I'll give you Pete's number. And
Who's Pete?
Pete Salas.
Pete Salas, he's
retired, and
he's retired from the county, and then he leads the Boulder County Latino Coalition.
Okay.
That Boulder County Latino Coalition is a group that has been around for a very long time. We used to be the San Fernando Valley Migrant Coalition. And that group is primarily providers that work for different organizations, again, the cultural brokers that are in the front line. But there hasn't been, and I don't know if this is an area, a question around. We usually think of our Latino community as having needs. And so the first thing is we gotta connect them to resources. But we don't think of our Latino community in regards to quality of life. What contributes to quality of life? Exercising, social, well-being. So that conversation might be a place that with the county area aging agency. I always forget, there's like too many A's. Yeah. And even with AARP, right? We used to have, Juanita was part of the AARP, then Phil Hernandez, right? So how do we get those folks to also be supportive of the conversation, strategy building, and possibly they have resources?
I would just encourage you all to check out what we're already doing, because a lot of what you're brainstorming, we are still doing with the tiny team we have.
Yeah.
And we do have a lot of wonderful volunteers, and they are telling their friends, come sign up for this trip with me. We have scholarships, like they are great ambassadors, so we're already doing it. We just hope to do more.
At a greater capacity.
Well, Carmen, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This has been just excellent. Will you come back?
Sure. You,
Half an
they
hour?
know how to get a hold of me,
Yeah.
so whatever you need, they know how to get a hold of me, Brenda.
Okay.
So
You
whatever
guys
need.
from the feasibility conversation?
Yeah.
Otherwise, I wonder what the hell you're doing here.
Okay,
I am the AAA rep.
oh, cool.
Would you be interested, we're not meeting July and August, but would you be interested in coming and doing a presentation to them?
Yeah.
I'll bring that up in our September meeting.
Okay,
Okay,
we got a lot to think about. Thank you so much.
Call
Thank you,
me.
Marlena.
when you need me, okay?
Okay.
Thanks, Carl.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay,
Alrighty.
who wants to introduce these folks here?
Well, I don't even know who these people are.
We just wandered in because somebody said
They
there's
heard
coffee in
free
here.
coffee.
They want to talk.
So as we've talked, the city is considering the potential of building a new rec center. So we have contracted with Perkins Will to do a study and to develop what could possibly be included in a rec center, as well as what it would cost to build and operate and maintain it. So we have identified focus groups of who we want to talk to. So Ben Wagner is the Recreation and Golf Superintendent. He is with the city staff. I'll introduce Chris, who is with Perkins Will, and I'll let you take it from there, Chris.
Sounds great. Actually, is it
Set up a
possible
table.
for me to present on the screen there, or is it easier just to chat? It's up to you guys.
Yeah.
I don't wanna make it difficult, but I'll go ahead and,
That's fine.
Where do I
Yeah.
plug in?
Right over
Oh, at the podium. Okay, you know what I might be able to? I'm gonna say I might be able to.
Change the cord to yours.
Yeah. Just go here.
I guess that does totally depend on this position, because it really comes down to his time. He has the time capacity to do a lot of these things.
It's on. Do you want the lights off or?
No, I don't think we need to go that.
So, I mean, she gave a good foundation if this position is run the direction you start to build.
all right. So I'm Chris Kostelik with Perkins and Will Architects, and as Jeff mentioned, we've been contracted by the city to do a feasibility evaluation of a potential community rec center. And today with me also is Kevin Shu and Kaylee Hinkman. They are with sports facility companies. They are experts in the analysis and planning of recreation facilities. So I'm just an architect. I draw things. These guys are the people that do the analytics. So I'm just gonna give a very brief kind of introduction to the process, but really our goal today is to have a discussion, answer some questions you might have, sort of discuss the comments around what a community rec center might be for Longmont. So we're gonna do a little bit of that. Some of the feedback that we've done thus far, I'd like to kind of give you an overview of that. And then, like I said, we want to spend your time actually discussing this and not having me point you to death. So our process involves quite a bit of work, and there's a little bit of background that I think is probably important to frame. We've gone through a process similar to this in the past, where we studied the potential for a large aquatic facility and ice rink that went to vote back in 2009. Prior to this, there have been other discussions. So this isn't the first time that Longmont has looked into expanding recreation services, but here we are now sort of talking about the potential for a pretty significant potential facility, possibly going to election at some point in the near future. We did learn some lessons from that time period, just about how we think we need to gather outreach, how we need to understand the community, make sure we're taking something to the voters that makes sense and could have viable support. There's also a proposal out there with the YMCA. They're looking at the potential for a large aquatic facility as well as an ice rink. Maybe working in concert with the city to provide those services so that those don't have to fall on the burden of the citizens alone, and the YMCA can kind of share those opportunities. And then there was some council direction recently back in the end of April to really kind of take this process to the next step. So that's why we're here. That's why we're talking to you all, because you have a broad usership that you represent that would potentially have a lot of opportunities for use in this type of building. Oops. So that's sort of the goal of the study. Identify the community needs and expectations. We're doing market and demographic analysis. That's part of SFC's role. We're doing community outreach. We actually have a public meeting this evening right here at 6:30. All welcome to join. And we're also going to be taking that and using that to develop a sort of menu of what this building should include, putting together some cost estimates, putting together an operation and revenue analysis. So we always say, can you afford to own what you can afford to build? Making sure that this isn't going to burden the city unnecessarily. I think Longmont is great. Their recreation, I'll give Jeff and Ben some props here. Their recreation programs kill it. They do, compared to other communities in Colorado, they're a high revenue recovery. They're very efficient, well run, well managed. So the good news is you don't have a bad recreation department that's trying to build a new center. You have a long-established recreation department that's providing valuable services, and I think this is sort of the next evolution of that. So the schedule, we started back in April. This is pretty quick for this type of work. We're trying to get this wrapped up by the end of the month. So this is really kind of the meaty middle of this process. We've done some demographic research. We did a community open house back at the end of April and took some good feedback from the folks that attended that. It was both in person and virtual. Starting now to develop some of the things on the project that we need to understand, like what does this thing include, where would it be located, and then we have that open house tonight, and then through the rest of the month, we basically wrap up concepts that we would then present back out to the community and to City Council. I believe we're presenting to the Park and Rec Advisory Board on Monday night, so you were a big part of this sort of community outreach effort to understand sort of how active aging adults play a role in this type of facility like this.
Going back to the timeline, at what point does the council have to make a decision if they're going to put it on the ballot or not?
In August, they have to do that. They have to approve it in two readings.
In August.
So we're hopefully going to go to council with this proposal July 11th is our goal right now, which meets that target. But then in August, council will decide what we'll move forward with on the ballot in November.
Yep, thanks for stepping in with the specifics here. Any other questions about the process or the timeline? Pretty straightforward. Like I said, it's very quick, so there's not a lot of time to dilly-dally. The site for the project has also been identified, and this one is probably a discussion topic that has come up in quite a few of our meetings. Is this an appropriate location for a large public facility? It has been on the Park Rec Open Space Master Plan for the better part of 15 years, so this isn't a new idea that this has been identified as a potential location for larger recreation services. It is the current site of Dry Creek Park, which is outdoor fields, playground, other uses, sort of near several high schools, including Silver Creek, Altoona Middle School, elementary. So it is kind of in a school district. So again, certainly the side of that being congestion, but the other side being these are your active participants, right? These are the big user groups. So I think this is really something we need to understand, study, and make sure that if we do indeed design something at Dry Creek Park, that it's integrated, sensitive for me, that it fits the context and is respectful of both the neighbors, the open space, and all the different things like traffic patterns within that area. I'll click to this and then I'll let you guys jump in and ask any questions you might have. So this is just a quick test fit to say, does this type of facility even fit well within the available property at that site? And so what we're showing is the potential for this roughly 80 to 90,000 square foot recreation facility, which is right in line with sort of typical benchmark facilities across both this community and others. Along with the potential, we call it a future civic use, but one of the things that's been identified is a library to sort of share services with recreation. But as you can see, with probably some additional parking, all of the different recreational functions, some of the outdoor functions, it definitely fits the site well and has plenty of room to sort of breathe on that property. But that's really our next step, is to better understand how this facility will integrate into that location.
Do you have a map that shows this and all of the facilities that the city, recreation facilities?
I do. I don't have it
That would be
here.
so helpful for me to see.
Yes. Okay, you know what? I probably have time to add that to our public meeting for this evening. If I don't have time.
I can't comment.
No related
But that would be a
No, I
good
think you're
thing.
exactly right, because then you see where all the services
Yeah.
are being provided, Centennial, Quail Road.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, part of my question is related to what you just brought up. If the city is concerned about equity, that seems to be a fairly high income area, if I'm not mistaken. If I can place that correctly. There's some very nice residential areas around that area. It seems to me that if lower income people, whether they're Hispanic or white or whatever they might be, the lower they are on the income scale, the greater the transportation problem would be to get there. So the question is that equitable in terms of access to all of the folks in the community?
I think it gets back to the core question of equitability versus gap analysis, to say, okay, you've got Quail Road, you've got Centennial, they're serving other various portions of the city. This portion of the city doesn't necessarily have as many of those services, but to your point, does that mean that this portion seems deserving of those services to be located here? I'll let Jeff kind of respond to that question. Is that, again,
That's always
part of
been
the-
my
it's part of
question
open
about the
space
whole
plan.
project.
Yeah, is this the best place for this facility?
Exactly.
It's a fundamental question.
So in the proposal from the YMCA is to tear down Centennial Pool and build a new recreation facility which would have ice, a gym, swimming pool, and childcare, along with affordable housing. We feel like what we had proposed in the initial survey was we were gonna spend $7 million to convert Centennial Pool into a community center with courts. Very, very soundly, it was very clear people didn't want the pool to go away in the results. For a $12 million investment, the city would provide all of those other amenities to that area of town. So we believe that each one of the locations, short of Northwest Longmont, would be very well served. The challenge of Northwest Longmont is the city doesn't own any land that would be large enough to build a facility this size. So based on what we have available, this is the best possible site based on the other locations that we have.
So it was primarily a financial issue.
Well, if we're gonna buy land, the number that's already $64 million, which is probably gonna be higher than that because we developed those costs a year ago, and it could be a year and a half before we build. So that number could easily be 72 to 78 million without having to invest another 5 to 10 million to buy a piece of property that'd be large enough to do this. The $64 million number is scary enough, let alone it getting up close to $100 million.
And our other rec center is in the east side of town. It's within a couple of miles. And we don't have anything on the west side of town. And space is the biggest issue.
And that's really where much of
That's
the growth is
Right.
moving is west, right? So you sort of plan 10 years, 20 years in the future and say, is this really where growth is happening? I think that's your question. Interestingly enough, when you bring up Centennial Pool, and we actually did the study for Jeff to convert convert that facility. One of the things we found is even though the pool is probably one of the most well-used lap pools that I can think of that I've ever seen, most of those swim team and high school users are from across the city. But the users in that actual neighborhood actually requested things more like gymnasiums for wrestling and boxing and other uses. So you've got the swim function in that neighborhood, but the swimmers are coming there from citywide. The actual neighborhood is looking for a lot of other amenities. So I feel like maybe kind of recalibrating the services that are offered across the city's network through this study, I think will help. It'll help figure out where things should go to best serve the user groups in that area.
And the other thing that we've kind of talked about is the need for senior-specific programming space. And what we've talked about is adding more rooms like this one where Ronnie and his staff could be able to do more programming because we all know that this building's pretty tapped out unless we open up later or go on the weekends. So there is a senior component as well as there is, based on, I think, Janine, one of the things you've always mentioned is the need of the therapeutic pool. And we had some pretty good feedback at that first meeting about that and are really looking at including that as well as the dedicated senior programming space.
What about adding on to the senior center?
That could be a potential, but that is not in what is being discussed right now.
I think that would make more sense. It's centrally located.
So
Anyway.
So here would be my response. This is just Jeff talking. Nobody else has heard this, or I look at Ben as he's sitting pretty close to me. But if my thought is that if recreation will get a new facility at this location, one of the things that could possibly happen is the use at the Memorial Building could become more based on senior type of uses. It meets that central location. It's easy to move staff back and forth, but it's one of those things that could be considered.
But there is expansion capability on this entire site, isn't there?
Not necessarily. That's not what was in the master plan for the park. And master plans can certainly change, but there's limited space really for
You can go up as well.
You could, but I would guess you'd have to scrape the building to be able to do a facility that would have the foundation that could support the.
And I think to that point, it all depends on what you're talking about adding. If you're talking about adding, say, a gymnasium for pickleball, I think it probably makes sense to think about the Memorial. But if you're talking about more
I think it's
meeting,
meeting rooms that they
enrichment
need.
space, classrooms, then it might make more sense to add. But I think to Jeff's point, it kind of depends on what we're talking about and whether that plays into the kind of the master planning for the site. Because I think that
One of the things that Ronnie and I have talked about is the back patio. That certainly could be closed in to add some more space. I believe he's working with, or is going to be working with a design person to just give us a ballpark of what that would cost, but I don't know that we can go much broader than that.
Have there been conversations regarding what aging-related services programs could go in there, or is that something that needs to be talked about?
Going here?
Yeah.
Not that specific, just.
Okay, so that's something that has to be developed at.
I think it would be difficult logistically for Ronnie's staff to be able to
See,
work
and I
within
don't
both.
agree with that.
I would disagree.
Yeah, because
We have
recreation
facilities
is
all over the
Yeah.
city, and
Yeah.
folks that program, work at one facility, program at another. That's very consistent with what we're doing in other places.
That's something that has to be worked out, yeah.
Yeah, there are no specifics
What
to
they
that.
are, yeah.
I mean,
That's
it's
not-
within 5 miles,
Yeah.
the reality.
And the other experience that recreation has is all of our outdoor facilities. I mean, we go from 3 facilities year round to in the summer months, we add 4 more facilities. When you include, we have a big part of the operation of Union Reservoir. There would be no reason why senior services couldn't have multiple locations as well. Is it different? Is it as convenient? No, but it certainly would probably make people at this area of town happy that they don't have to travel all the way to the senior center. And one of the things that we've always talked about over the years, Michelle Wade being a part of that as the former senior manager, is really trying to develop programming and facilities much like we do city parks within the community. You don't want everybody to always have to travel across town. You build specific locations throughout to make it as convenient as possible for people to be able to access them.
Like Boulder has two.
Yes,
facilities.
exactly.
Have you ever entertained the idea of some type of shuttle program or shuttle service to do that once you
We
get a
do
facility?
some
You
limited.
don't have a reason to now, probably,
Yeah,
but
well,
if you did,
They
that might-
do actually quite a few trips where they provide transportation for hiking trips.
Gotcha.
They do
Volunteers,
transportation
other
to different events, and they actually contract, I believe, buses to go like down to the Buell Theater or up to the casinos. So they have some really great experience that they provide in that, as well as historically, they have, the senior center has a great travel program where they've traveled and taken groups all over the world in different settings. So, and I believe they're working to get back into that.
So it's kind of up to the senior center to make sure that we get involved in
Absolutely.
there.
This is,
If we sit back and not do anything, nothing's gonna happen.
Well,
yes.
and the programs, the shuttling and all that it serves very few people.
It's costly.
It serves very few people, based on the senior population in this town. I mean, it's very limited, it's a lottery.
Yeah, I see that as a problem. too.
Yeah.
Well, to that point, one of the criticisms of our first open house of the 75 or so attendees was there was very little representation. It was in this facility. I think the median age was probably well over 60. So to your point of having representation and sort of the needs of that particular user group, I think we heard loud and clear a lot of those use patterns. I think it's tricky, and I don't want to get too far off track here, but excuse me. One of the things we always consider when we're looking at the potential for a second facility is how do you complement without replacing? Right? How do you build on what this center is doing without saying we're going to build a second center? So I think what we're really considering, at least from a lot of feedback we've had, is sort of a satellite where it's maybe more of a touchdown spot, lounge, maybe a senior services coordinator, but really just having a satellite location to be able to access then all the other recreational uses within that building, because there will be enrichment classes, there will be fitness and wellness programs, there will be space for things like pickleball and other athletic uses. So the whole point is not to say we've got the senior center, let's build a second facility and sort of compete. It's how do we expand those services citywide without taking away what this center does. Now, it might mean, to that point, that this requires some investment in some of those amenities as well. I mean, the point is you have to look at it holistically and recognize that it's providing services, not just providing locations.
Where would senior services fit in there
Well,
of any
that's a
kind?
good
There's a
question.
community space.
So we did hold a public input session, and a lot of the feedback that came out of that session identified some of the uses that we think are important in there. And granted, we just sort of circled the top sort of 10 or 12 uses. A lot of them are, therapy pool, fitness and exercise, some of the other uses that may play into that walking, running track. But then you get pretty close here and you start seeing things like silver sneakers and cooking and enrichment programs. So the whole point is, I think there's a lot of programming that came out of our outreach. And here's a second tabulation of activities that really started keying in on some of those functions: enrichment programs, instructional programs, low impact fitness and wellness and health programs. And so what we took from that, and I won't go too deep into the other feedback, what we took from that was we have to understand the priorities. And so this evening, we're bringing some programming priorities to this public input session One of them in particular focuses very heavily on aquatics. That's been a very high request. And what that probably means is it sort of pushes some of those other community functions to a lower priority. We do have sort of a senior activity area, and we do have sort of fitness areas, gymnasium space, but this program is showing people what it looks like if you invest the vast majority of your budget into the expensive aquatic programs. If you look at a second program and say, well, let's lean a little less heavily into the aquatics, and that frees up a lot of money for more of that enrichment space with classrooms and meeting spaces and a teaching and catering kitchen and maybe that senior activity area, still accessing the recreation and fitness and wellness and gymnasium spaces and the therapy pool. So frankly, we feel like this is probably better serving of the uses. But what it shows is if you want a lot of pool, you don't get a lot else, and that's the problem.
Do we have any idea about the age group that of the city that we're serving, let's say, west of Hoover? Have we been looking at how many people over the age of 60 live in that area versus how many single-family homes with kids? Has any
I will
any
answer
work
your
been
question
done
very
with that?
simply with, we have not dove
Okay.
in. One of the things in this process, because it's sort of quick, most of our surveying has been pretty, how can I say, it's pretty anecdotal surveying, SurveyMonkey, it's going out to constant
Okay.
contact. If we had conducted a long, exhaustive, month-long, many-monthly, statistically valid survey, we probably could have parsed out those various data sets and said, for this section of this area code, or this portion of the zip code, we could have teased out all that data. What we do find, and having done this for 28 years and probably done hundreds of these types of studies, even though that analysis can kind of hone in on some specific data, generally it aligns pretty carefully, pretty closely with a more citywide assessment. Because I guess what I'm saying is that would be helpful data to have, but I don't know that it would veer us more than a few percentage points away from kind of a citywide services type of approach. Does that make sense?
So it wouldn't dictate necessarily utilization of the facility.
It could. And here's the thing with these facilities. We don't like to build too much of these things that are so singularly serving, like, let's say, climbing wall, for instance. Right. Everything on here that you see is multi-purpose space and can change and convert and adapt over time. So if we say, look, we want way more of these types of programs, we have the ability to change and manipulate our programming. So I guess what I'm getting at is I think we're building enough flexibility into the thinking that we can adapt, and if someone says, boy, I really want this new type of programming, the hope is that we've designed something that can adapt to that, not that we've excluded that. I think a gentleman came up to me at the public meeting and said, I do Alzheimer's boxing. It's the best thing for me. Can we do that at this facility? Well, of course we can. We have studios, we have gymnasium space, but I don't have to put a space here that says Alzheimer's boxing studio, right? So the point is, I think the adaptability is the key to these. And that's how you adjust to demographics that change. To answer the question, is there demographics that say it should or shouldn't be on the northwest side of the city? We don't really have that data set. We have some gap analysis that shows where the general facilities are located and what their service area is. And I think that'll help answer the question if there's this big void in that part of the city. But it won't help you answer the question, does that demographic and that income level warrant that type of investment just because the services aren't there?
Let me add in, what's going to happen if this gets built, then in recreation, we'll be doing a complete evaluation from what's happening with the Y to what's happening in the Memorial Building to, if we don't have Centennial Pool anymore, we have to make our own adjustments, just for a very simple example. But the whole package will be looked at. We know we're gonna, I have given my personal, and we certainly have our department commitment to Lonnie and Senior Services. We work so closely together as it is. That's just going to continue. So we have one room here that we show, but adaptability is what we're all about, and we're all about change. This building 15 years ago when I started, as far as the activities, looks very different. Some of the same, but a lot of new different things, a lot of new different fitness classes, for example. So it'll be a complete evaluation of what we've got where, and we're gonna try things. And then if it doesn't work here, we try it at another location. So just know that that's what's going to happen if we are blessed with having, a new facility like this.
So there's a lot of options available for the kind of senior programming you might want. It can be adapted.
I mean, I think that's really what we were hoping to have the conversation around. What are the real opportunities that you see or that you would like to see that we study or bring forward in our planning? What are your concerns about the process? Are they related to the site? Are they related to this facility? Are they related to level of services across the community? So I think we were just hoping to make sure that you understood the breadth of the process, that you understood where the opportunities were and help guide us in those, and maybe help highlight a few of the concerns that we need to pay attention to as we kind of wrap up some of the study. We certainly don't want to have red flags that vast portions of the city are unhappy or uncomfortable with. So I think this is exactly what we were hoping to do, is really get out some of these ideas on the table so that we aren't ignoring them.
I think this is really excellent. It's a good design, it's meeting the community need. My biggest issue is, I think you agree, is accessibility to up in the northwest corner of the city. And I don't know quite what to do about that, because I understand the issue you're talking about, I do, but that is an issue.
And the point that maybe shuttle programs or other things that would historically be identified just don't seem to be
They don't seem to work that well.
Yeah, I would say that's probably.
What you're talking about here is you're still primarily talking about the one up by the Silver Creek.
Yes.
Now, will Centennial Pool and some of the other places, the renovations gonna be made, whatever, are going to be able to have a lot of these same facilities, right?
Yes, and so Centennial Pool would go away
Right.
if the Y proposal would be approved. But it would have pool, it would have ice, a gymnasium, and childcare.
Meeting rooms.
But it's a private facility.
And we are working on, in fact, we had a meeting just this morning with the YMCA about how we address if city tax dollars are going into it, how do we provide access to our taxpayers? And that information would be made available in July when we have it as well.
In
How-
July,
When we talked about going to city council in July, we'd make that proposal for access of memberships, both for Y.
and the community would be made aware of all that too.
Yes, yes.
But you would still have the silver sneakers there too, right?
The Y has
Yeah,
silver
Y
sneakers
has.
there, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But they would be associated with the senior center.
No,
For the
So
city.
But-
it's their own.
well, the city
Silver
does.
sneakers is silver
yeah.
sneakers.
We,
Right, or I'm
we
just
would,
saying it's not an extension of the senior center at all, it's just, they're their own program.
but we certainly would offer silver sneakers at this location.
And we would not have access to any programming at that location,
At the Y.
right?
I mean, there is a potential you could develop working relationships where if you wanted to have deep water or something, that you could do that as well. We just haven't had those conversations.
Right now, and I'm not part of those conversations, but it seems like you're at this level just dealing with the sort of basic relationship of how does the city provide services under the umbrella of the Y with the varying fee structures and programming systems.
Yes.
So it's just an intergovernmental type of conversation. But presumably before it was finalized, you'd have a pretty
I would think
specific program description of what you will and will not.
people are gonna want that information if they're gonna vote for or against that project.
And will Chris and his board be able to commit to anything by,
Yes, they're ready to commit right now.
and the community would know exactly what that commitment would be by the time the vote Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, they're so interdependent.
Because there's the whole housing piece of it. I have no knowledge of how that works. That's just not my world. So there would be, I can't remember the number, 100 housing units that would go along with this that helps pay for this development. Did I not?
You mentioned.
Yeah. We've shared the drawings too, right? I'll resend those again just so you have those to look at. But so there is a component of this to move forward also is based on being able to get assistance from the federal government to help pay for that
Affordable housing?
Yes.
That's becoming
it's
a
all-
very common model for the YMCA.
Yes.
It's kind of how they bridge the gap between funding their facilities and getting that federal funding. There's an example on the way down to Colorado Springs of that model, the YMCA Colorado Springs built affordable housing. I think you're going to see that a lot more often in place. It's how YMCA's for a long time struggled to make ends meet when they were just building recreational facilities. So they've kind of gone back to their core model where they started, which was housing and recreation. So I think it makes some sense. Whether it happens or not, that's the question, this commitment that they're about to make. So yeah, as you can see, this is a bit of a complex study that there's a couple of moving parts, but we want to stay focused on serving the citizens of Longmont with what we propose, what we suggest. Obviously the why playing into that, but we don't want to be too distracted. So the hope is that we gain enough feedback through the outreach, some of the surveying that we're doing, that we understand what citizens need first and foremost, so that we can best provide for that.
Will the Zoom portion be available after tonight?
Will what be available?
Well,
So tonight there is not a virtual part of it. It's
why
only.
not?
It's an open house. We just felt like the virtual part of it was tricky. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna present information at 4 stations, and then all the information we present will be made available online. It'll be this information right here, information on the site, some of the aquatics information, and there will be information on some various activities. So that will be made available on the website.
On what website?
The city's website, the link, in fact, it's right there. This is where we've been directing people to go for regular project updates. It includes anything that we've presented thus far in public. It's just a good resource center for getting information on our process that we've been going.
So the information about tonight will be on that?
Yes,
And if you want to give input, if the community wants to give input, they know where to, do they know about this
that will be
website
part of the
and
website.
what's
We'll be
happening?
add
We've
comments.
been advertising that all the way through the process.
We found that last time, as much as the virtual, when it's a presentation, it's easy for us to present in public and then present virtually. But when it's a discussion, it becomes a little more difficult. So we just felt like, let's do the service to the people that have taken their time to show up in the room to have that conversation. And then we'll come up with an entirely different way to have that conversation virtually. We just felt like there was too many, where people online weren't getting what we were doing in person, and people in person weren't seeing what people online were conveying. So we thought that was a better way of doing it, and that's where we're headed.
So, how much more do you have?
We're done, yeah. This is the conversation that I was, and I just want to point out one more thing. This is the QR code and the survey link for the survey that's online right now. Just doing some general polling of questions about recreation preferences, use patterns, support. There's about 130 responses that have already been logged thus far. This has been live a little less than a week. We'll be presenting this tonight. We'll leave it open for another week or two. We'd be happy to get you this information to provide to your usership if they haven't already received it through Constant Contact. We want as many people in the city as possible.
We lose so much not having a newspaper anymore.
Yeah, it's tough.
Communication.
We've tried to get information out, and we've, I think, done a pretty
So
good
hard.
job in the short time we've tried. But I think this is something that we want to make sure, and if it's possible to send this to you all, if you haven't already received it, we'll make sure that you get this content for your membership. And we'll keep this live basically through the end of.
Okay, very good. Any final questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you all. This has been great.
It's been very good.
We appreciate
Very
it.
good. Thanks again.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay.
Get lights.
Move back over?
Yeah,
Okay.
Hey,
You
I
can
was
reposition.
I was nice.
I think it's an ongoing organization itself.
But no, nothing like we ended last night.
It's not a setup.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, thank you for coming.
Thank you all.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well, those were a couple, it took a little longer on the agenda than I figured, but that's okay. We got a lot of items. Can we get through these rather quickly? I think maybe we can. Let's say, going back to new business, we finished the issue of the July meeting that you brought up, so I think we're done with that. Going back to old business, debrief meeting with the city manager, Harold. Anybody have any comments about that, or how do you think it went, or anything you have to say, any kind of follow-up on that?
Wish I could have been there.
Yeah, it was a good meeting, I thought.
I think he was very straightforward. I think he was honest. He didn't present anything to me that I was surprised at, and I wish we had more money.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line, and you can't create it. So,
The one thing that I got out of it more than anything is that it didn't turn out a whole lot different than I expected, really. We didn't expect to get a whole bunch of staff or anything like that. But Harold did say, and I mentioned this to you, Ronnie, he said you've been heard. And to me, that was important, that he actually said it. He acknowledged that we were taking a point of view. And so we're kind of on his radar. Not that we weren't before, I think we were, but I think it's just important to make a point with the people that are the decision makers, like Harold. So and I think we did that. So all in all, I guess I was satisfied with it, even though we maybe got a half a position that we might share. That's what he said,
Oh,
I don't know what the budget, I don't know
What's
how.
that?
I didn't feel that we were.
he made a suggestion of teaming up with LHJ for a halftime position for us, halftime for them. 'Cause they
With
had
who?
some,
I'm sorry.
LHJ Longmont Housing Authority.
don't we already do
Um,
that?
We work counseling,
Yeah.
on-site support, but not for programming. So this one would be an opportunity for them to program on-site and try and get some of the residents outside of their facility and get them to the senior center to meet new people, focus on that mental emotional wellness piece of making those connections. So still made that request, but still moved forward with my number one request being a
Yeah.
full-time
Yeah.
Spanish programmer here.
Right.
And so that was, again, still put that in there, because if you want to fund both of them, then that's an option. So,
That'd be great.
Well,
But one of the things that I did like is that we are, they are posting some of these positions, not only in the center, but in the city, of Spanish bilingual required, because everybody's doing it. It just seems like, I don't know that they're saying required, but
They
preferred.
actually, I look at my emails and look at those new positions, and they all
Required.
require.
Good,
Yeah.
for here in the city, because I know with the schools, they definitely looking at a lot of that, and some of the other places are too, so that's a real good thing, and I hope we continue with that. Man, I tell you, your money is the real big one.
It is.
Of course, the same number of staff members that there was, how many years ago?
3 years, basically.
Yeah,
Well,
but there's, nothing we can do about that.
well, there is. We can keep nagging at them.
Well, yeah, we can, but what I'm saying,
yeah.
there's only so much money that
Right.
the city has to.
In reality,
And-
people are looking at increased cost of living, increased taxes, which is
The
gonna
taxes
affect
are unbelievable.
homeowners as well as renters, because rent's gonna go up. so we can push, but the reality of it is, these are tough times.
And hiring, I mean, posting, positions until filled rather than having a deadline on them, I think is a good thing, because as we've said in the past, you post a position and you wait 2 weeks, by the time the 2 weeks is up, the person that applied immediately already has another job, you know, so the ongoing is a great thing.
One thing that I got out of it, and I mentioned this to both Ronnie and to Jeff the other day, you know, getting a whole lot more resources just isn't going to happen for a while. You know, even if we get something more in a year or two, you know, it's a ways down the road. So that leaves us, what can we really do? And it seems to me that we got two big things that we got to do, and the Spanish program is one of several, and it is to find out what the priorities are, you know, and then how are the staff and resources allocated to the resources, and that may or may not match up with everything that's being done right now. The stuff that Carmen talked about, I thought she was wonderful the way she presented everything. But that's going to require some resources and some staff time, money, and you know, here we can make these big plans, but who's going to actually go do this stuff? You know, so you rob Paul to pay Peter, I think, is part of what we might see as far as staffing and services in the future.
So I think we, as Robin mentioned, we have a good foundation right now, and some of this work is being done.
Right.
We just want to be more intentional and grow it at a larger capacity.
I think
but with that, I think she laid out a good foundation of, if this position is funded, of where to go for it. So how to take the things we're doing right now currently, take those things are going well, but how do we, continue?
Yeah, I've said it many times. I think what the senior center is doing is wonderful work. However, if you shift priorities, you might have to pull something from one area and push it into another.
Ronnie, am I correct in memory-wise that a couple of meetings ago, I got the feeling with the report from the Friends that we've kind of tapped out with them in terms of getting them to support positions or have positions, so they're no longer a resource. And to some degree they were in the past, but I understand that their feeling is the city should do more, and the city's saying they don't have it. So I just wanted to be clear that that was the story about that.
That is correct. They made it very clear that that they don't want to fund these positions anymore. That, as you mentioned, that it's the city's responsibility, it's not theirs. And they pretty much made it clear that as of 2024, they're no longer going to. They're not going to fund those positions as of 2024. But what that does is, if the city doesn't pick that up, which I made that request, my budget request to the city pick up those positions, then we still have to fund it, but it's going to impact our recreation budget. So even though they're not funding it, that puts it on us to figure out how to pay for those positions. And that puts us in a tough spot.
Got some tough planning ahead.
Yeah. So if you'd like to go to those Friends board meetings and talk to them about that, then that would be great too.
And I need to, I'm not defending them, but to say that they continue to do a fair amount of financial support to the senior center in other ways, in terms of grants and helping people, not just scholarships, but giving emergency funding for housing for people that are on the street, helping people with medical issues. I mean, resource managers apply to them on a regular basis for grants to help, you know, our population, but they're just not willing to fund positions anymore. But they do a lot, they really do.
Okay, I don't know what else to say about that, that's just kind of the way it is right at the moment.
It is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
And
we
like-
can work on it, but that's kind
And,
of
you
the
know,
way it is.
they want me to go to the city for a lot of these things and say, hey,
Yeah.
pick these up. But I explained to them this last meeting, the process, it's not just a wave of magic wand, it's the process. These requests have to go through a certain time period and channel. Then there's the waiting period, the evaluation period, and then the yes or no period, that an example would be internet. We just worked with them to improve our Wi-Fi. They wanted me to go to the city and say, "City, you pay for this?" I told them we could do that, but that even if they agree to it, that would not be approved till January. Like, the Wi-Fi needs to be approved right now. We can't wait an additional 6 months. So sometimes there's a sense of urgency on some of these requests, and I don't know if they fully understand those processes, that how long everything takes, and the process to make these requests. So we would like them to be there, you know.
I'm just
Maybe we
wondering how
need to start having fundraisers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Big
Sell
sales.
cookies, you know.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Great, right?
Yeah, burritos.
I'm just wondering,
Those are huge.
I'm just wondering how we might navigate this. Is it primarily coming from Linda, or is it the whole board that feels this way?
I don't know.
Because I know how she feels,
Right.
but I don't know about the rest of the board.
The communication I receive is from Linda. I don't know if that's communication from the board or from her directly. I can't say yes or no, but.
Okay. Okay, well, I thought maybe I might I've been threatening to have a conversation with her. I don't know if it would do any good, but it might help, you know.
Or do a bang.
Yeah, great. Okay, we are rapidly running out of time here. Probably the most important thing next is the board candidate interviews. Where are we at with that?
Haven't heard anything, have you? On the
No.
processes?
So
You interviewed 2 people.
we interviewed 2 people. It was Ronnie and I and Sheila and Art. We were unanimous in that the 2 individuals were very good, would be a good fit, and made the recommendation to the clerk's office that both of them be selected. I believe the last meeting in June, council will make their appointments to become effective in July.
Could they be at the July meeting?
Yes.
That'd be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Even more
much.
so with it being moved back a week,
Yes.
because I was worried that people might be leaving for the longer holiday with the 4th in there.
And the candidates know the timeline and everything.
Yeah, we explained that they would hear from the clerk's office after that last council meeting.
Cool.
In June.
Like we talked about briefly, I really think these new people need an orientation. And maybe we need to do some of that too. We can talk about that. All right, good. So we might have a couple, they're both women, is that right?
Yes.
Um,
Elon and Arlene.
Yes.
okay. I'm sorry, what were their names?
Elon
Elon.
Dooley and Arlene, I cannot remember her last
I
name.
think such a disease.
Yeah.
Is it the Arlene from Longmont Housing?
Yes.
Oh my God, she is wonderful. You're gonna love her. I work with her on Boulder County Area and Aging. What an asset she's gonna be.
Great,
Thank
great.
you.
They were very good.
Yeah.
Good.
They were.
Good. All right, the customer service data report, I think that's been handed out. That's this one right here, is that right?
Yeah.
Can you, I think maybe everybody's had a chance to review that, but if we could quickly summarize that?
Yeah, so we had a total of 551 participants, 318 online and 233 in person. And then our 3 questions are broken down here. I like visuals as well, just the, says the analytic piece. So question 1, were you provided information on where to access our classes and resources? 95% said yes. And 2, are your needs to be met here at the senior center? 94% said yes, that's 520 participants. And question 3, does our staff help answer your questions or provide you the information you are seeking? 95% said yes, and that's a 524%. $524 individuals
Yeah.
said yes, sorry.
You know what that tells me? Is together with our survey that we did earlier, about, 6 months ago, that people overwhelmingly approve and think highly of the services that we currently provide among the current people that come to the center. So I don't think there's any question about that. They have a few negatives here and there, but the vast majority is very positive.
Ronnie, did you and your staff, I'm just looking at the rest of this, did you garner some new information from all the answers?
So not yet, this was an advisory board, survey, and I wanted to present it to the advisory board before I got it to the staff hands. So now we'll be able to go to.
What's your personal opinion,
with the results?
based on 6 months here,
Yeah, or with my opinion on the results?
on this, on all these suggestions and, there are a lot of suggestions here that I'm looking at.
Yeah. So, what do I think? I mean.
That's too much to address right now, I'm sure. But,
I think it's just good information. It gives us a starting point for our team to take a look at it.
Yeah,
See if there's any adjustments we need to make, any things we need to tweak.
that's great, because you got a lot of response.
Right.
With the,
But back to the
Details.
study questions and the 95% success rate in the responses.
At this point, I'd leave it up to you if it's okay with everybody. If you think there's something further we need to talk about, we can bring it back to the board. Otherwise, we'll just trust your judgment.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay, we might go a couple of minutes over here. I wanted to talk about board goals, and just try to make this quick here. I'm thinking, we all submitted goals, and Beth, you remember you had some fairly specific ones. And Jeanette, yours kind of was very similar to mine, I think, in terms of a general role. I guess what I want to propose, and since we're all kind of saying about the same thing, I don't want to vote on it or anything, I just want to mention it, and then we'll talk about it more next time perhaps, is that the state, not the county, the city, let me get the right jurisdiction here, has a statement of powers on what our duties and responsibilities are, and I think everybody's looked at that. I would say we just adopt that as a general goal statement, and those are the things that we try to do as a board. And maybe we'll share that next time with the new members, and if everybody's okay with it, we'll just vote on it, and that will be our generalized goal. We have some more specific goals.
Can you reshare it with the whole board again?
Yeah, I can.
I mean,
Next time?
yeah,
Yeah,
on,
I can.
as far as the documents.
It's just the city ordinance is all it is.
Yeah,
But
but,
I certainly can do that next time. We can talk about that, along with some of the more specific, some goals. Now, the next thing, where do we go from here? I guess is my big question. I think we're done with budget and staffing. We spent a lot of time on that, and we've done what we can. So what do we do next? And I thought Carmen's presentation was really excellent. Do we want to proceed with this as kind of the main focus of this board?
I'm not
There's
seeing it.
there's lots of other things we could talk about that we could focus on. I mean, there's transportation, there's mental health, there's housing.
I think Ronnie could give us the best direction on that.
I think this is good information right now, allows us to sit on it. I mean, we can come back to and visit at any point, especially once we get closer to finding out if this position is something we will be able to have in 2024. Because already my brain's running a million different directions with information Carmen provided, which is great information, right? And how does that piggyback off of the stuff we're doing now without increasing work capacity, right, for our current teams?
Well, but Dave's talking about board goals, and they have to intertwine with you and your staff's goals, in my opinion.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Well,
guess go
It's
ahead.
also the senior community, the seniors of Longmont, not just the senior center. And a real passion of mine right now, because I have to deal with people in and around housing and keeping seniors off the streets. I would like to see us be a continued voice and support, not reminding the city they do as much as they can, but really looking at alternatives for helping people stay off the street, especially seniors with the limited numbers of senior housing availability. I mean, the wait list for senior housing on average in this community is, if we're lucky, 6 months. And when we have somebody end up on the street or they're being evicted, we don't have an emergency backup system. So there are certain city problems that affect older adults that I'd like to see this board be an ongoing active voice and constant pain in the butt, really.
That's the way to do it, be a pain in the butt.
But would that be a board goal? I mean, is that, I mean,
it
a
should be.
priority for the board to focus on?
I
I
don't
guess that's
think
the
it's
question.
a priority. I think that my view of this board is that we represent seniors in the community.
Mhm.
We don't just make, recommendations to the senior center.
Right.
So those are the kind of things I don't want to go
Yeah,
by the wayside.
yeah, we really are supposed to be making recommendations to the city council, but you know what? I've come to the conclusion that's kind of difficult to do because Harold is gatekeeper. And nothing much gets past Harold unless he wants it to get past him. And so it's, in a way, it's kind of difficult to make recommendation when you got a gatekeeper like that.
Unless we show up at
Even
city
though
council
he was
meetings.
very receptive, I got a lot of respect for the guy. But the way the thing is set up, it's kind of difficult.
Yeah, and I don't know that I would call Harold a gatekeeper. I think it was important for him to come to talk to you all,
Oh,
to
absolutely.
understand the broad impact of how many things he's really addressing. And that I think he wanted you to hear from him directly that as much as he would like to fund everything, there's no way he can do that. And I don't know that if you had a recommendation like you said about housing for all seniors or for everybody, that you could send informational items to council. I don't think that's the things that he's talking about. I think he wanted you to have a baseline of what his thoughts were and how he makes.
What's possible. Yeah, but good. I stand corrected and I'm glad you did it.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right.
And we have Marcia here
Yeah.
as ears representing the
Right.
city council,
Right.
that we can constantly, remind her about, how big of a problem is it? What are we seeing? I think unless you're constantly informed about the number of people that are gonna end up on the street that are older adults, that it does perpetuate it. It's a more realistic problem to them when they're actually facing the day-to-day encounters that people have with this.
And I think you're absolutely right. To me, the top issue is housing. It affects almost everything. I mean, there's other important issues, but you gotta have people off the street. So I'm thinking, does everybody agree with that?
I
What
don't
I'm thinking
know.
is we could have another presentation. I don't know if one of your staff would wanna do it, or maybe somebody else regarding the whole housing issue, maybe someone from area aging, I don't know.
I would like to hear from someone about what those line items would be besides housing, because I'm new on the board and I don't have enough information to be able to say that's the number one thing.
Well, I guess I'm thinking that we need more information to be briefed on. I'm not an expert on anything.
You know, we could actually even have somebody from one of our resource managers come and really inform you about what people they're seeing in the community, what our housing availability is, how many people that
Transportation.
dealing with. And honestly, I think that's a good start, but staying engaged with what are the problems that seniors are experiencing in our community and having people bring that up to you as a reality.
You know, I think to have an impact, we're gonna have to grab hold of issues like housing, like budget,
Transportation.
like staffing, like transportation. We're gonna have to stay with it, which means we're gonna have probably multiple discussions about this, multiple people involved. And it's gonna take some time, it's gonna be incremental, like Carmen says. These are complicated problems, so we have to educate ourselves if we're gonna make any meaningful kind of recommendations.
Right.
And I don't think it's always about the senior center or senior services addressing. It's about all of us advocating for seniors across our community.
That too,
And
that too.
And what I don't really know, percentage-wise, people that are affected-wise, are what these issues are, and where can we find that information?
I think we can invite the resource staff. I think we could invite somebody from LHA
AAA?
to, no, LHA,
Oh,
the Housing
oh,
Authority, to come and talk, because they should know more than anyone, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
one.
And then transportation, maybe we start with Phil Greenwald, who is in charge of transportation issues within the city. Maybe he comes and talks to you as well over the rest of this year.
Well, you
So
know,
the one thing I would suggest, and I know we've had this on the agenda
I was
for
gonna say that.
a long time. The challenge is we got two new board members that are gonna be coming in that will bring a point of view, and maybe this conversation is better had when they're here, when
I agree.
when everybody's
Yeah, I
here.
totally agree. So I would suggest, we're past time. I would suggest that if you folks will trust us, that
Who's us? No.
Ronnie and Jeff and I, we will put together an agenda for next time, which gets us a start on some of these issues. Like, you know, you mentioned a couple, 3 people we could invite, maybe some resource staff or whatever. But let us structure information and who would provide it to the board, starting with our next meeting.
And we have a new board member that's on the
Exactly.
Longmont
They'll be on
Housing
board with us
Authority
from the
board.
beginning.
President.
And back to, what agency would have an overview of what affects our aging population here in Longmont? Would area agency, or the area agency on aging have a pretty good handle on what the issues are? I would think so.
Boulder
I don't know
County.
enough about them, but
Boulder County, yes, but not specifically.
But wouldn't that
Like our
be
resource
pretty similar,
places to start.
I agree.
in
Well, maybe
your opinion?
Human services.
Well, let's just say their wait lists, and I don't know what their potential homeless population is, but I know their wait list for Boulder County housing isn't the same as Longmont housing.
What I need to know is what besides the homeless population, what besides housing are impacting the senior population in our city?
And I think the folks we mentioned would be a great starting
Okay.
point, because they're specific to Longmont, which is
Right.
Okay.
your
Yeah.
goal. We certainly could bring somebody from Boulder County in later, but I think The local
Those are
folks
the
are
three.
the expertise,
Yeah,
experts for these areas.
I agree. We start incrementally, like Colin was saying, we build on this stuff, because it's gonna take a little while. Well, if everybody's okay with that approach that I mentioned, though I don't think we need a motion or anything, but if you're okay with it, okay.
Let me ask one quick question, both the gentlemen. Does the city have, I don't know, a volunteer coordinator, if you will, that just really works on trying to get volunteers in different places?
There's not a volunteer coordinator that represents the entire city.
Okay.
There are volunteer coordinators in certain areas of the city. For example, Parks and Natural Resources has a volunteer coordinator, but they don't help out recreation or senior services. It's really about how do they help the park system. Ronnie and his staff are required to do volunteers as a part of the job and everything else that they have to do.
Char.
Yeah, Char, that's one of Char's things, but Char can't do all of that, so if Brandy wanted to do something, she would have to add that to her schedule to make that happen.
I guess the reality is, we're gonna have to really do something about volunteers, because we're not gonna get a whole lot of new staff. You know?
Right.
I mean, I don't have the answer for it, but
That's a
that's
good
something
point,
further
Art.
that needs to be discussed.
That's a very good point,
Anyway,
because it's not gonna change.
oh, that's a good one. We're not gonna-
Well, I think we could talk,
Everybody else is looking.
we
for
could go all
something.
afternoon, I'm afraid. All right, is there a motion to
Isn't this
adjourn?
fun?
That's so moved.
Okay, a second?
I second.
All those in favor say aye or something.
Yes, sir.
Aye. Okay.
Thank you for your
Thanks,
leadership.
everyone.